Ready?
Breaker, we are en route to Jasper. Let's go. Yeehaw!
That's pretty cool.
Before we go any further, I think it's important to talk about the gear that you're going to see throughout this video. So I have a number of things in front of me. Some of them are the things that I use all of the time. Some of them are just some nice to haves. I'm going to give you a brief overview of everything here. Throughout this video, we are going to be shooting everything on, actually all the photos and also the videos you're going to see are all from the Nikon Z6 II. The Z7 II is also a phenomenal camera. If you're interested in making larger prints, that might be the direction to go in. 24 megapixel camera, totally great for me for the size of prints that I know I'm going to be making, as well as it ticks all the boxes for my commercial work and my wedding work and my portrait work. So this really is the correct camera for me. There are also videos of everything that you see here on my channel. So if you're interested in getting a little bit more information about a specific piece of gear, head over to the channel to find out more. And that includes the Z6 II review as well. On my Z6 II 24-70 f2.8. This is the lens that I use pretty much all of the time. I would say as far as travel and landscape photography goes that this is my go-to. Also pretty much all the video you're going to be seeing throughout this video as well is all shot from this lens. So it is incredibly versatile for just all things. That this is the lens that I would go for. And you might notice if you are interested in purchasing a Z6 II that it might come as part of a kit with a 24-70 f4 lens. That lens is incredible. There's a review on my channel if you're interested in learning a little bit more about that. Where the f2.8 steps ahead a little bit, in my opinion, of the f4 version is there is an element of magic in here that Nikon designs things both to be technically, optically great, as well as keeps that artistic element alive. And I find that when I shoot this lens that the images on the back of my camera, just the JPEGs, look phenomenal. And there is just something that's just a little bit different that I can't ever replicate with any other camera system. So I really do appreciate Nikon for keeping the art alive in their lenses. 24-70, I walk into a scene, walk into a landscape scenario, this is the lens that's on my camera. And at that point, I figure out, do I need to go wider or do I need to go more telephoto in order to get the image that I would like? To give some metrics, I'm likely using this lens here in about 80% of my work. And then the other 20% is kind of scattered around these other lenses. Moving into my second favorite lens, the lens that I use the second most often, the 70-200 f2.8. This lens here is the one that I wish I would have purchased and I would have saw the value in a lot sooner. Specifically when it comes to landscape and travel work, it's very important to have a lens that can reach the compositions that you might not be able to reach when the 24-70 just doesn't quite make it. Basically the way that all these lenses work together, this is what's considered the trinity for Nikon, that the 24-70 is kind of that main regular focal length, 70-200 telephoto, telephoto to what I would say you reasonably would ever find yourself in a landscape travel photography environment, and then a super wide that we're going to talk about in a second here. The 70-200 helps me create compositions that just would be impossible otherwise. And then in this specific tutorial, we're going to talk a little bit about actually photographing wildlife. And one thing I've done to make this an even more versatile 70-200 is actually brought a 2-time teleconverter. So for the Nikon Z series, you can either get a 2.0 converter or a 1.4 converter. And essentially what it does is it multiplies your focal length. So with this 2x converter, my 70-200 becomes something like a 140-400, which is a very useful lens to have. And then beyond that, you can actually go into crop sensor mode in your camera. So you now have access to a 600mm lens, which is pretty crazy. Again, super versatile. To give some sort of metrics on how often I use a teleconverter, I would say 80% of the time, lens only, 20% of the time teleconverter, but as you can see, very, very small and definitely something worth bringing with you. The one, I guess, negative is that when you add a teleconverter, so you're getting that extra reach, you are losing stops of light. So if you're using the Z 1.4 teleconverter, you're losing 1 stop of light. So your f2.8 lens is now an f4 lens. If you're using the 2.0, you're going to lose 2 stops of light, which means that your f2.8 lens is now an f5.6 lens. But when you're outside in the daytime, I think that's totally fine. And also with the high ISO capabilities of these cameras, it really isn't a problem at all. Moving into the wide angle section, this is the 14 to 24 f2.8. This is the best super wide lens that I have ever used. I am absolutely blown away by it. The weight of it, I think, also really impressed me. That I was expecting it to be very heavy. It's very easy to bring with you in the field. I think the same goes with really all of the Nikon Z series lenses, is that they are designed to be traveled with. And I really do appreciate that and their commitment to just keeping gear a little bit smaller. This super wide came in critically handy in a number of situations throughout this trip, but we'll get to more of that throughout the video. My one nice to have, specifically when it comes to astrophotography, is this 20mm f1.8. Astrophotography wise, it's a wide aperture, so it's a 1.8 lens, lets in lots of light, and it's also wide enough to capture a lot of the night sky. I would say that this is something that I would use for weddings and portraits, and either the 20mm or the 24 or potentially even the 35 is always on my second camera body when I'm at a wedding day. But if you are interested in Astro and maybe this 14 to 24 isn't in your budget, I would definitely recommend going to this 20mm lens, because it is one, even for the original DSLRs, that I absolutely loved having. And then the upgrade in quality to this lens here, I'm very happy with. So definitely something to consider if you're interested in getting those wide night skies. And another thing I'll comment on quickly, Z series lenses, the primes, are all, even the 1.8 primes are all designed to a professional standard. So as a pro shooter, I am totally happy to use any of the primes. Don't see the 1.8 as like oh, that must be a beginner prime. They are by no means beginner primes, and I'm absolutely happy to use them for any part of my work, including weddings and portraits. The last thing you're gonna see on the table here, a tripod. This is the Peak Design travel tripod. I enjoy it. You can get whatever tripod you want as long as it's nice and holds your camera stable. The reason I like this is because it really is relatively small and it fits within my carry-on. My carry-on is about this big and this fits comfortably in there. And also just the level of sturdiness, I've been very happy with it overall. But there are lots of different tripods out there in the world, so make sure you make the correct decision based on what you want to be doing. And I didn't plan to talk about it, but I'm gonna grab my bag real quick too. So the bag that I use on this trip, the Peak Design everyday backpack. This is the 20 liter, the smaller version of it. With the Nikon Z series lenses, everything is small enough to fit in here. My entire kit fits in here. 2 camera bodies, 70-200, 24 to 70, teleconverter, 20mm lens, all in here, and my laptop, and a lot of the cords, extra batteries, and a couple filters, all fit within here. And you can also get the capture clip if you want to actually just be able to clip your camera right up here so you don't have to put it back in. And then the other important thing is to get a bag that is, I don't know if weather sealing is the correct term, but a bag that is resilient versus the weather. So this thing's been covered in snow, it's been out in the rain, and it has done a phenomenal job keeping my cameras and lenses dry. To speak about filters quickly, I personally use the screw-on filters. There are glass plate filters as well as screw-on filters. If you find yourself using a lot of them and you're using them on all different lenses, it probably makes sense to go for the glass plate filters. For me, I find that pretty much all of the time I'm using my filters on my 24 to 70 millimeter lens, so I only really need to get the thread size for that. The filter that I use the most is just an ND filter, so a neutral density filter. It really just works as sunglasses for your camera, which means that you're able to actually get something like a 10-second shutter speed outside in the sun if you're interested in that. Specifically for me, it is either to slow down water to make it look all nice and silky if you're out there at a waterfall or a river running by, or maybe more importantly, and what I use it maybe a little bit more for, is doing long exposures on water that has that nice reflection to it, but I want the reflection to come through even more. That if there are small ripples in the water, those are going to come through if you're doing something like a 1/2000th of a second exposure outside. But if you're able to get that down to like a 20-second exposure, all those ripples just kind of disappear and you're left with these beautiful reflections. ND filters, the most important thing is to make sure that they give you the correct color through the filter and into your camera. Another filter you can use is a circular polarizer, so a CPL filter. What that does is it basically allows you to spin the filter around and you select which section of the frame you actually want to be polarized. So what a polarization filter does, it either removes those reflections from the water or makes the sky a little bit more blue. To give some metrics, I would say that I'm using the ND filter, ND 1000 filter, pretty much 95% of the time. circular polarizer 5% of the time. If you're into video, maybe an important thing to have is a variable ND. So while this one is a full 10 stop, that it's just like those sunglasses doesn't change, that's all it is. With something like this Polar Pro variable ND filter, essentially what it does is you can change the intensity of those sunglasses in front of your camera. If you're doing video and you want to keep your shutter speed at a specific values like 1/180th of a second, you're able to use a variable ND to do that. So basically it starts, this one is a 2 to 5 times, so you have the option to go all the way from 2 to 5 stops of light that it'll be stopping coming through the lens. I've just found with photography it's a little less important to have a variable ND. They're a little bit more for video, but if capturing the video is also an important part of your travel experience, by all means get a variable ND. And that is all for gear. Let's head on location to the mountains. Landscape photography can go down a few different paths, and there is no right or wrong mindset to be in. Enjoyment comes in different ways for different people. Some people will spend an entire day hiking just to capture a few frames. Some will collect as many photos as they possibly can from all different locations, kind of like trading cards. And some will be there to photograph a special project or to capture a print, and some just won't know why they're there at all, and that's fine. I think for most of us, we are a blend of all of these on different days. And to speak to this video specifically, I am here to capture images for a gallery show that I'm holding a week from now. It's a time-sensitive game that I created for myself, and all the images have to be photographed on this trip. Because of that, there's an efficiency and pace to this tutorial that might not otherwise exist. Getting great landscape photos on this trip for me requires planning. It also requires a little cooperation from the very unruly Mother Nature herself. Well, you certainly discover great photo opportunities while you're in the field. To start out with a few ideas is a lot smarter, especially in this case. When planning our trip, we visited a few Instagram feeds that were specific to the areas that we were heading, and from there we made a short list of places that we'd like to visit. From that list, we went a little bit deeper on each location. Is it the best at sunrise, midday, or sunset? Do we need clear visibility at that location, or are clouds and snow fine as well? And is there anything time sensitive? So in our case, we were racing to this specific lake before it froze, and we just got there with 2 days to spare. This is the same lake 2 days later. More on that later in this video. From the list that we created, we knew that we would not get to them all, but it gave us options depending on the weather and light of the day. When it comes to landscape photography, one of the most important things is obviously light. That is what you're documenting. That's what you're capturing when you're out here taking images. And to base your locations on the lighting and the current opportunities, I think is kind of what landscape photography is all about. That if something's just not working or doesn't look like, you can even scout on Instagram if you're on your way somewhere, and you can just look up Instagram and find the most recent posts, and you can see what that location looks like currently if it's a somewhat popular spot. But the most important thing is just to take advantage of whatever is looking good. We were on our way up this way. We were actually going to go up to Lake Louise, but we kind of figured that the lake would be in the shade, so it wouldn't really be the best shot. Mountains, nicely lit, and we figured if we came here, we'd get the mountains in the background, and then within like 2.5 minutes, the train just came. This train never comes this way. It does, but it's very rare. You have to be here a long time usually. And we were just fortunate enough to get it, and we didn't even get set up. We didn't even get an establishing video shot, and it was just there all of a sudden. So that was really, really cool. I'm happy we got that shot. Because this image happened so fast, I thought that I would walk you through kind of the decisions that I made as a basic compositional element. So compositions we're going to talk about throughout the rest of this tutorial and the decisions that I made. This is kind of basic rule of thirds. So sorry for my lousy drawing on the screen there. That is kind of the top quadrant. We'll make that a little better. Something like that. So that's kind of the top 1/3. This is kind of the middle 1/3 here. And then the bottom 1/3 is down here, the foreground. And you can also do this vertically. So if you have interest that's kind of in the left side, in the center, and then also in the right, to put your subjects kind of in these corners is, I would say these are the general rules, but ones that can be broken. So as you can see, this is a little more center composed, but the way that the train kind of leads around here makes it end up working out pretty well. But if it was just a single person standing in the scene, usually if you put the subject of interest or the subject of the most interest in one of those corners, it is kind of the best case most of the time. Again, you begin with the rules, and if you decide that that's just not something that feels right to you, by all means, just completely ignore them and figure out what works the best for your photography. So having a good foreground, it would be nice. I guess maybe ways to improve the image. If these trees were covered in snow, that'd be amazing. I could probably do this edit and just fill this hill in with snow, and I feel like that brings the image together a little bit better. Basically, I find that this section here is kind of competing whenever I first look at the image, that it pulls my eye over there. So by filling that in with snow, maybe a better thing overall. I took a lot of frames as this train rolled through. Maybe in the rule of thirds context of things, that if the front of the train was right here, that might actually work pretty well also. I think that by having it kind of where it's at over here, it makes for a better feeling image. The mountains are just literally on a slant here. So I would love to have this as just like perfectly rectilinear where the mountains are just like up here. You could make that edit, but in real life, this is what it looks like. So I'm okay with that. Cloud, a little too dark. I would probably take a little bit of a dodge and burn tool and lighten that up a little bit, just so it's not, again, like a very distracting element. And maybe one other thing to mention, that this was the image that I wanted, but there are other image opportunities within this. One, without the subject, it still looks great. So if this train was gone, it still looks, it's a very nice scene. You can also get some slow shutter of the train actually moving and showing motion. And I like to kind of capture everything that I can. I find that on the back of my camera, I can't necessarily tell what the best image is on site. So I capture a few different images and I try to push myself to maybe create one or two more images after I've already kind of feel like I've done the entire scene. I'm like, I think we're ready to go. If I can create one or two more images after that, I feel like those at least push my creativity mentally a little bit more. So shout out to the train, I guess. And also the historical element of this, I feel like is really cool as well, that Canadian Pacific here, the reason that this national park exists and that it was Canada's first national park is because of the rail line going through there. So it's very cool to include the history of why this place essentially exists. Obviously the mountains would exist, but it wouldn't be Canada's first national park had it not been for the railway kind of punching through here and discovering how beautiful it actually was and dragging Canadians out towards the west. So that's why that photo works. Let's do a new location. Alex put his skates on a little bit too early, so now he has to go for a hike in his skates. You're doing great, sweetie. You can actually see the lake freezing right now. Like the lake is creeping in on us. Like this is the last day. There's ice here. By tomorrow, this photo's gonna be gone. It's the importance of actually getting to the place. Most of the effort, I think, in landscape photography is actually getting to the location. And then a little bit of that is based on your preparation as far as weather goes. Today, pretty snowy, but it's kind of working with the scene that we have going here. When I find myself in a scene like this, what I would like to be a little bit better is the water a little bit more calm. So I want to do a longer shutter speed. Right now it's still very dark. One of the reasons to wake up early in the morning and just get out here. So I can actually just, without putting a filter on my camera, I can actually do a 2 or 3 or even 10-second exposure. And basically my balance is, as I add more seconds to the shutter, I bring the f-stop down a little bit to balance out. Nikon Z6 II, I can see exactly the exposure that I'm getting, so no guesswork there. And I'm just gonna try a 10-second exposure and I'm gonna see what that looks like. Again, I'm going to walk you through a few of my decisions here. With the 10-second exposure, you can see that the water is completely smoothed out, that in real life, there is a bit of a current that kind of comes through here. So that is why I did that 10-second exposure, to make sure that this is nice and reflective. You don't want to use a polarizing filter on a scene like this, or you'll actually see through the water a little bit too much. So that's why I just went filterless in this. A few other things, a few other elements, I guess, as I spoke to last time, rule of thirds, there's kind of that strong middle section, there's a foreground, and there's a kind of I guess an empty space section up here, negative space. There's usually mountains and whatnot, but you can't really see them. They're kind of like up here in the background. That's one way that the image could have come together a little bit better. Leading lines are very important. So this bridge is leading you into the scene. And then also the natural framing as well, I think is pretty strong in this image. So I have the natural frame down here. By adding a natural frame to the image, you really do kind of just enhance how good it is and also how good it prints. It would be really, really nice to have some sort of natural frame up at the top as well, but unfortunately we did not get that today. Usually that would be kind of the mountains like this, that would kind of frame the image in. One other thing that I don't love, so this log out here, if this log was on an angle like this and kind of framing into the image, it would be a much stronger image. This log unfortunately kind of frames you out like this of the image, which I don't love. I could get rid of it in post-production, but I think it's there. I think it's nice enough because it is covered with snow. It's a nice element, but I almost wish that like it kind of just stopped right here. So I guess you could do that in post-production if you want. Color-wise, everything went really well. I might have to bring this this down a little bit in the highlights just because it's a little too bright. I really love the way that the trees just naturally lit up here, and I didn't really do a whole lot to this in post-production, surprisingly, even though it looks like an absolute Christmas card. I also added a little bit of vignette, so as you can see the corners here, again, kind of just making that natural frame a little bit. Technically, this would be considered a camera flaw, so you can either add this or you can take this away if you want. I think that it frames this image pretty well, though, so I'm overall very happy with this image. And with that shot complete, we're actually going to head over here, and Jacob has driven up from Calgary with his canoe to be our model. He's going to be #1 canoe model 2021 calendar. I'm excited for the calendar. We're not going to print that calendar.
November's the perfect weather for canoeing.
We're out here with Jacob and his canoe. He's canoeing around. I have chosen the 70-200 2.8 so that I'm able to basically capture anything and I can frame any shot that I really want. It is important to have a longer lens when you are in a landscape environment. I think that they're traditionally for wedding and portrait shooters, but I think having a longer lens like this 70-200 2.8S is super important to have out in the field, especially with the weather sealing and all the adverse conditions that we're experiencing today, as far as just like everything's just wet, it's cold, it's icy. We're taking good photos and everything looks amazing. So we're finding warmth in that. I took a lot of photos of this scene because it really was something that I found to be really beautiful. Jacob, as you can see, human element in red, so just really popping out from the scene. I chose this image specifically to show you because I feel like this kind of feels like it's almost like sound waves, and he's just kind of escaping those sound waves. So he's just about to break out into this negative space, this negative reflective environment. I might even go as far to kind of make the crop somewhere about here, just because you can see that these logs are in the foreground here, and if they were to disappear, I feel like it would be a stronger image. So maybe cropping it somewhere kind of like this would make for a better image overall. It might be weirdly balanced, so maybe let's speak to, forget about this, that this space no longer exists up here and down here. So now we're looking at almost a cinematic like 16:9 style frame. And when you go into rule of thirds, so if you're going into the vertical rule of thirds, kind of like this, all of a sudden, I kind of cheated a little bit on that. He's pretty close to kind of that corner that I spoke to in the beginning, as well as just like all of this just being all this open negative space, as well as the leading line that's kind of bringing you into the image here and bringing you up from the image here. And then I think there's something to be said about kind of the rule of three. So there's kind of three subjects. There's the trees, there's Jacob, and then there's this big empty space. And I feel like those three subjects go really well together. If I was to add anything else to this, I feel like it would just become a confusing image to look at. And this is just very simple and very pleasing to look at. You could also go as far to add kind of an overlay of snow. So just like some nice little snow pieces up here, because it did exist in real life. So I wouldn't have any issues kind of adding that. I'm not replacing a sky into a different scene that completely doesn't exist. I'm just adding something that was naturally there that was just very difficult to capture. Again, on my 70-200 for this, and this image would not have worked with anything else. I really love the compression that I get as well, and just you get a sense of distance and a sense of depth that you would not have gotten had Jacob been a lot closer and I would have shot this with a super wide. When you find yourself in a situation like this, what you want to do is you want to make the water look basically like a proper mirror. So as you can see, there's a slight current, there's some ripples in the water, which means if I take that photo, there's going to be it's not going to be the most ideal foreground. So what you actually want is an ND filter. And what an ND filter or a neutral density filter is it just makes, well, I'll show you. So what a variable ND filter is, you can come in, it's mostly transparent. And as you bring the ND in, it gets a little darker. That's all it does. So you can shoot that 10-second shutter speed out here, so you get that nice calm water. You let basically the longer the shutter's open, the more the water's gonna smooth itself out. So let's take some photos. Similar to the last image with Jacob and the canoe, the symmetry really brings this image together here. It's very, very pleasing overall. And also there's probably another frame that if you were to crop in to here, or if you were to zoom in and actually shoot that as your frame, that would be a very simple, very pleasing image also. As you can see, leading line again appearing over here, using the same leading line. We were over on this side to shoot the other image in the blue hour morning. As somebody that grew up, I guess, in North America, reading left to right, I feel like if I was to horizontally flip this image, it would make for a better image. It would disconnect it from reality because that's not really what the scene is. But if the bridge was coming in from this way and I was kind of reading into the scene like this, I feel like it would be a stronger image overall. So I guess maybe something to think about, and depending on where your tolerance is on that could be a thing that you could do. I left this as a little bit of a wider crop simply because I actually really enjoy these trees over here. I've shot this same scene in the summer and I actually really, really love the kind of natural contrast and the frosting on these trees and the frosting on this restaurant over here. I know that I'm going to be printing this as one of the largest images of the gallery show, so that's also why I left it a little bit larger. If I was printing this on an 8x10 or an 11x14 or something of that size, I would likely be kind of sticking to that crop right there to make for a stronger, smaller print. But knowing that I'm going to be printing this very large, I am okay to leave it like this. And to speak to the natural framing a little bit, as you can see, I've added a little bit of vignette up here in the corners and the bottom corners as well. And then also these I've framed intentionally right there to kind of just like, again, kind of push you into the scene and to show that this is kind of the natural frame. This is where the image stops. I could have also moved a few feet over to the left and ignored that and just had it all as negative space. But that's the decision that I made. And had there not been snow on these rocks, I wouldn't have included them. But because there is a little bit of snow, I kind of liked it. So it adds some realness and some foreground to the scene where normally what you'd see is just that crop kind of right there. Incredible morning. Getting a lot of heat over my fingerless gloves, but they are performing quite well in this climate for photography. I think they're an underrated glove. Got a bit of a bad rap for the past couple of years, but I think they're coming back.
Anything else you'd like to say about the fingerless gloves?
Like, they're surprisingly warm. They legitimately are. That my fingers, like, you guys have hand warmers in, and I have no hand warmers, and I have full access to everything that I would need on my camera. So I think they're a good buy. I'm happy. We're out here with Rockies, Heli Canada, and we've just had the most amazing tour. We woke up super early and left Jasper at 5 in the morning to get here for the earliest flight we could, which was 9 a.m. Went for a flight, and it was kind of first light all over the mountains, and it really was the perfect time to be out here. We got a few little clouds over the mountains, which really added to the photography opportunities and just made everything look just a heck of a lot better. Really, this could not have come together better than it did today. The mental game of landscape photography is also very interesting. So we went on the helicopter. The video clips I got, I absolutely love. The photos just really didn't convey what it felt to be there. I find that there are some photo moments and there are some video moments. I feel like a helicopter is more a video moment than a photo moment. So if you're ever out there and you're in an amazing experience and you're capturing all kinds of photos and it just doesn't translate when you get home, know that that is not a thing that's unique to you, that happens to every single one of us out there. We're out here in Banff, which is one of the coolest downtowns that you can find anywhere in the world. It is the downtown core with Rundle Mountain right at the end of it. So we got up nice and early for Blue Hour to make sure we got that nice fresh track shot. We got a little bit of snow last night, so we figured that today was the day to go on this shot. And we chose Blue Hour because the ambient mixes with the incandescent lights down here and it makes a more surreal style image. And also waking up nice and early means there are not a whole lot of cars on the road, which is really great. So let's get back to taking this photo. The straight out of camera file, a little too blue. It's basically there's just a lot of ambient snow in the foreground here, which is kind of causing it to light up. White balance wise, I kind of enjoy it a little bit more like this. It looks a little more dramatic like this. I also cleaned up, as you can see, a lot of the signs and the fire hydrants. Shooting them, I knew that this was something that I was going to have to do, so I just did a quick quick edit in Photoshop to speak a little bit about the image. So this is an image that I definitely 100% saw online, and I wanted to just go out and create for myself. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If something inspires you to wake up early in the morning, I feel like that's awesome. So we came out here, we waited for the snow because I wanted these kind of tracks. If it would have been completely snowed over, that would have been really, really nice, but I like that you can see that people have been here. What makes this image work really, really well are these big leading lines leading you into the mountain up here. So big 2 leading lines. We waited for that snow cover so that we could just kind of get those nice tracks. And then framing this pedestrian, I might have missed it by like a half a second. If he or she would have been over just a little bit to the left, I feel like that would have been a little more perfect. And then it was also about just waiting for no cars, waking up early in the morning. If you want to get to a location and you don't want a lot of people on the street or cars or whatever, just wake up earlier than everyone else. And early in the winter isn't really even that early. This is like 7:30 in the morning or something. Again, you can see I've added this vignette here. I felt that it needed it up in the top corners. There's a very strong frame down here, but up in the top corner it just kind of faded out to nothing. So I felt by bringing in a little darkness up here and up here, that it kind of held you in the image rather than letting you escape. So that's something that I think makes for a better image. But again, season to taste. If that's not for you, then that's not for you. You don't have to do what I say. Not your parents. Yep. Next, we're off to go skiing. Alex has never been skiing, so it's going to be an interesting experience. The reason we're actually going skiing is to get a single photo. You can't get this photo from anywhere else. You can't fly either helicopters or drones in the national park, but you can go up the mountain and you can get this shot of the Lake Louise Chateau with the lake behind it. And most of the time people aren't stupid enough to bring their 70-200 with a 2-time teleconverter up skiing with them. So we're going to be one of the only people with this shot, other than maybe the Fairmont marketing team, because I've seen it a few times already. But I think it's a cool angle, and I'm excited to get out on the hill and just do some photography from a snowboard. What could go wrong? We won't break anything.
Yeah, we'll be fine.
This is my first time snowboarding in several years. I'm sure it'll be fine. Alex's first time skiing. It's gonna be a little bit of a warm-up period there, or maybe we just hop right on the gondola. Lugged all this expensive gear up here, and it's just cloudy, and we can't see the lake. So now that the clouds have cleared, we've actually seen that this is a phenomenal shot, and 2 days ago would have been the absolute perfect time to be here, but it was a snowstorm 2 days ago, so it might not have been the most ideal, but the lake still, there's a lot of variables that go into getting the shot. It only really exists for a couple of days with snow on the mountains, snow on the trees, and the lake still blue. So you very much have to get it on that exact correct day. And if you don't live here, you might not ever get to experience that. You got to experience it through photography. And that's why photography is important, to experience the moments that you can't from the comfort of your computer chair. It's like actually ice. So Icefields Parkway is not just a clever name. I think Alex should get his skates on and go for an ice skate down the parkway. So great news, we have convinced Alex to go for a skate on the Icefields Parkway. Almost sunset, so maybe the first sunset skate here on the Icefields Parkway. How you feeling?
Doesn't get more Canadian than this. If you are determined in life, you work hard, one day your dreams will come true. Woo! Let's go for a skate. Great outdoors. Oh. Not all ice. It's pretty chippy. Whoa! The ice.
My shot's gonna be once you're like right about here. So if you want to come down, I'll make anything work though. All right, I've set my camera to continuous high. Lots of frames per second. Here comes Richard. Many, many frames. Very nice. I really did not expect to find bubbles. I thought that this was one of the shots that we were just not going to get, and here they are. The key is to find bubbles that are on multiple layers. It's nice if they're all just frozen, but you want to find things with depth so that it shows a little height of the bubble. There's one right there that's really nice. There's one right there. There's a lot right here. All right, I'm going to get down and I'm going to make this shot with the Nikon 14-24 f2.8. I try to stay away from vertical images on this video. I took a lot of them for social media. They're very important. You get more screen space. If somebody's scrolling through your Instagram, they'll see this image. It'll be a lot larger than if it was a horizontal image. For this video specifically, I thought it was more important to do some horizontal images. That said, this one is the exception. The tones, the way everything came together, very painterly. That is because the ice is just kind of, it's like the perfect day to have been there. I can't believe we actually got to see bubbles. It's super rare, and for kind of this skating in the wild, very, very cool. This is also a great reason to use a super wide angle lens when you want to distort reality in the foreground there. I could have used my polarizer, but I actually broke my polarizer. I fell down on snowboarding. Had I had that, I could have minimized some of these reflections here to bring in a little bit more green, or I could actually just go in Photoshop and I could grab this color and maybe even paint some of it back naturally. But on site, I was very, very aware of getting the bubbles in something that actually gave me this, the nice blue-green color, rather than trying to photograph them in something that was really reflective of the clouds. I also like the way that the focus falls off. So the closer you get, the shallower your depth of field is going to become. I wanted these mountains in the background, but I didn't want them everything to be like 100% sharp all the way through. And I really love the way that this sky feels. I might be as a fan of that sky as I am of these actual bubbles here. I just really like the tones and the way that this just looks out of focus. So shout out, I think, to the 14 to 24 2.8 and the way that it kind of pieces this together, that the color and the contrast as a base point, just amazing to work with. Right here, Castle Mountain, just off the highway, literally off the main highway. There's a turnoff point, and it's one of the best angles on Castle Mountain, in my opinion. 70-200, very important. This light looks a lot like an Apple desktop, like one of the default desktops. The way that the colors and everything came together, it looks very, it's kind of California-y light, just based basically on, essentially on the tones that are kind of in Castle Mountain here. I didn't really do anything too fancy. Again, working those natural frames down here. I got that foreground natural frame, kind of working as a rule of thirds. Castle Mountain kind of center composed, but there's some good kind of leading lines that come up and come down, kind of like that. So I feel like you kind of, your eye naturally goes kind of around the image, kind of like this, which is kind of a nice motion to have. There's one tree that kind of bothers me that's right there that I could get rid of, no problem. And I like the way the sky rolls from something that's a little bit lighter kind of into this darkness over here. I feel like it kind of brings you along as you go through the image. One thing that I did do wrong, or maybe I just didn't process it well enough, is that I kind of clipped this highlight. So when you're out shooting basically snow scenes, be very aware when the sun's on that snow to make sure that you get the right exposure. I have lots of dynamic range, so I can easily bring that back in post-production with the Nikon Z6 II. That's not a problem at all, but just something to be aware of. And this image really just came together because we saw that we were getting a nice sunset and we're like, where can we go? And this was on our short list of places to visit, and we got here just in time, and this was just a very, very beautiful scene, and only some crows tried to eat our snacks from our car while we weren't looking. That's it. That's all. Thank you so much for joining me. If you are interested in learning more about landscape photography, check out last year's tutorial. It's 3 hours long. Also, if you're interested in seeing the editing that goes on behind the scenes of this video, drop a comment below and say that you'd be interested in seeing that video, and I'll make it in the future. If you are interested in seeing more of our trip to the mountains, there is a link in the description below. And that's all. That's all I have to say today. Hope you're having a great day, and like this video if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe if you want to subscribe. I'll see you next time.